Mr. Rohit Vyas, welcome again to ITV Gold. I hope you're doing well today.
Thank you very much, and I hope you all are doing well.
Yes, of course. We have you as our number one political commentator and you are a veteran journalist. So let's dig right into it. Today, I have you on the show to discuss last night's vice presidential debate. So just kicking off this interview, I have to ask you, Senator Kamala Harris came in basically attacking President Trump on his doings as well as the way he has run his administration in the last 4 years. Vice President Mike Pence came into the debate basically targeting Kamala Harris, Senator Harris, on her work as a senator and her work with Joe Biden. I have to ask you, what did you feel about how they presented themselves and how they sort of related to the audience during this debate?
I think Kamala Harris actually, I was surprised that she did, I think, in my opinion, a lot better last night than the vice president did. I think she came across as articulate, as extremely intelligent, as understanding where this country is headed right now, and where she and the Biden administration, she led by the Biden administration, want to take the United States going forward. I think she wasn't so much on a personal attack of the two of them, of President Trump and the vice president, as much as the administration's record. And she tried to focus especially on its handling of the pandemic, the coronavirus crisis that we face and we're in the midst of continuing right now. So I think she tried to focus on that, talked about everything that was done in this administration, the chaos that has happened in the country in terms of the divide that we see now before us. In fact, as we do this interview, the FBI has announced in Michigan the busting of a militia gang that was threatening to kidnap the governor of Michigan and overthrow the state government. So we're in the midst of that kind of national chaos right now. And Kamala Harris, from the get-go, brought attention to that fact, which she blamed squarely on the shoulders of the administration.
Do you think Vice President Mike Pence defended the administration well? Where do you think he was perhaps right in his debate? We'll go to the wrong parts later.
Yeah, no, I think he did defend the administration. Now, well is up to the viewers to decide. I thought it was okay. I think what the vice president tends to do is think through very carefully what he says so he doesn't upset his boss, the president of the United States, which is understandable when you're a vice president and you have a president who's overseeing everything you do and is guiding the nation, guiding you, and you follow him. You would have to be cautious. So I thought he did try his best. I do think it was quite obvious to everyone that he overextended his time limit, which Kamala Harris did not. And several times, Vice President Trump, while he was not rude or nasty, as the first debate turned out to be, where, it was utter chaos between the president and the presidential aspiree. In this debate of last night, Vice President Pence was calm and vice presidential, I'd like to say. However, he overshot the runway several times and had to be brought in check by Susan Page from USA Today, who I thought was a fairly good moderator. Again, she lost control a bit, and I think she realized she lost control in the middle somewhere a bit, but she did her best. And the vice president bought himself a lot of time, which he should not have. However, Kamala Harris sprung right back, and a couple of times, if you noticed, if you watched the debate, she pointed out to the moderator, look, he had his time, he spoke, and now I get a chance to respond. So I think all in all, it was fairly balanced in that respect in terms of how the debate went off. As to substance, I think Kamala Harris came out with a lot of substance. I think the vice president was articulate in defending the administration, but was not able to speak about COVID, their tackling of the crisis. And I think he had a tough time trying to defend where we're headed now. And you notice nobody tried to get around to how the president was feeling because he's now tested positive for the virus himself.
Yeah, definitely. Just discussing more on COVID-19 and what was said in the debate last night, Senator Harris, when she was talking about the administration's response to COVID-19, said that the COVID response was a historic failure and they knew it and they covered it up. Vice President Mike Pence pivoted that statement into the fact that America came together and the nation sacrificed for each other. What kind of message does it bring when you have these contrary statements about the administration's response to COVID-19? And what do the audience really have to analyze when they look at that?
I think the audience must have been completely, utterly confused, as they have been since the beginning of this crisis. There are contradictory messages coming. No one knows, for instance, what the condition of the president is right now. There is no accurate forthcoming statement from his team of doctors or anybody right now, ever since he was released on Monday. And there's a lot of speculation going on right now. But as to the debate itself, I think that's what Kamala Harris was trying to do, was trying to focus the nation's attention on the fact that nothing has been done. This country is in the worst position internationally in terms of the virus, with more than 210,000 deaths. I believe it's close to 213,000 or something like that, or even more at this point of the interview that we're having here right now. And I think she tried to focus in that this has been a catastrophic failure on the part of the administration. Pence, who happens to be the head of the White House coronavirus task force, tried to defend the record by saying that they had come together, they had done whatever should be done, and the nation is doing fairly well when you think about the overall picture of how large this country is, with its population of 320 plus million people. I think he tried to make it seem like the 200,000 plus deaths was not so bad in relation to the population that we have in this country. And President Trump himself, as you know, has been talking about this being like the flu. But indeed, it's not like the flu. This is far more insidious, far more dangerous. There are far many more unknowns about this virus than there ever has been in at least 100 years. So I think the vice president was trying to defend the record. Whether he succeeded, I'm not too sure he did. I think Kamala Harris, in my opinion, and again, I point out to your viewers that I'm bipartisan myself. I'm not affiliated with either party. I speak as a journalist and as an analyst. And in my opinion, last night's debate was won by Kamala Harris.
Wow. What did you have to say about plexiglass that was used on the debate stage while we are discussing COVID-19 and perhaps the White House downplaying the impact and the amount of death we have seen? There was a plexiglass on that stage to protect people from COVID-19. What message does that send?
That was a good message. That was a responsible message. I think it's good for both Vice President Pence and Kamala Harris. Both campaigns, that was the Harris campaign which requested that, incidentally, because they have some doubts about the vice president's health, because they don't know if he's been infected by the president, who has tested positive. The vice president has tested negative all this time. But just to be sure, Kamala Harris's team did what anybody who has some kind of common sense would do and request, is please let's have some protections in place for the candidates in case the vice president, or for that matter, Kamala Harris herself, might be carrying the virus, even though they're all testing negative. You just never know. So this was a good safety precaution measure, and I don't think it sends any kind of negative message. Actually, it was something that's good for both candidates, in my opinion. Makes them both look good.
You know, while we are talking about the debate, something that really stood out to me as a woman was the fact that Roe v. Wade was practically ignored in the entire debate, and there was really no answer from Vice President. Why do you think this big issue is being ignored in debates right now?
So you're talking about the Supreme Court, basically.
Yes.
I think they didn't want to bring up the Supreme Court nominee. I think even Kamala Harris perhaps chose not to bring that up. Because that would then be the focus of the argument. It would detract from what they were trying to do. I think what the Biden camp wants to do is focus on this crisis, on the pandemic, on the economic woes of the average working American. That's where they wanted to focus this argument. They did not want to be distracted. If they had gone to the Supreme Court nomination, for instance, Amy Coney Barrett, that could have gone on and on and on and taken up a huge chunk of the debate. They didn't want to do that. I said, let's talk about this particular issue. The other thing that the Biden campaign has been talking about, and the Democrats, of course, is the Affordable Care Act.
Right.
So in a sense, they were touching upon the Supreme Court nomination as putting it in danger, which is what Kamala Harris pointed out. She looked at the camera and said, this administration is bent on taking away your insurance, to take away your health insurance, the Affordable Care Act, the Obamacare, all right? she made a point of saying it without talking about the Supreme Court nominee directly and focusing too much on it. So be very careful who you vote for. So I thought she succeeded very well on that, zeroing in on that you're going to lose if you have pre-existing conditions, if you have something like cancer, you have, any other diseases, maybe even COVID, etc. You will not be covered by any kind of insurance. I think she also tried to focus on the fact that while they talk about destroying Obamacare, they don't have an alternative plan. She was successful there. Vice President Pence, I saw him sort of being flummoxed by this whole healthcare debate, and didn't really have quite a good answer. I thought he'd have a good answer, but he didn't. This would have been his chance to have said that the Trump administration has a plan, but in fact, since they don't have a plan, he was unable to come up with any kind of concrete rebuttal to what she had to say about this.
And Vice President Mike Pence also basically ignored the question on if President Trump will accept the election's result if they were not in his favor. Do you think this is going to be a huge concern for us? While we are discussing voter awareness, we are discussing about the importance of casting that vote, but counting it and its validity is also very important. Do you see that becoming a bigger issue in the next few weeks?
Yeah, I think it will be a big issue. Now, this is aside from what the president has been saying, by the way. It's going to be contentious just from the way this whole thing has to play out because of the pandemic. Besides what the president has said about it, that it'll be rigged and all that, I'm not taking that into account at all. But when you're looking at so many mailed-in ballots, when you're looking at polling stations where people might be scared to go, et cetera, every single vote that's been sent by the mail will have to be accounted for. So in any case, in just a regular process, which I trust, which I'm sure most of America trusts, it's going to take a while. I think we're going to have an extended vote count. I don't think it's going to happen overnight. A lot of people have voted already in advance. They received their ballots by mail and they have voted. But now you take the state of Texas, for instance, they have in one county, which is Harris County, which is the home county of Houston, a huge city, a diverse city. The governor has said that there's going to be one voting booth over there, one drop-off station, as it were, in the county of Harris County. And people are calling that voter suppression. That's going to be contentious in and of itself, because if people are not able to drop off their ballots by the 3rd of November, they're going to insist that they'll stay for as many days as it takes to drop off those ballots. So you already have a situation where this vote count is going to go on and on and on. Under the U.S. Constitution, the election must take place when it does in the first week of the first Tuesday of November. And under the Constitution, a new president must be sworn in on the 20th of January. So these are facts that will still stay. There will be a transition, but how long that might take, we're going to see. There are also other variables, which I don't want to even touch right now, but a lot of things can happen and legally can happen if there is no resolution to this. There are a lot of things that can happen. There could, for instance, be talk about each state talking to their electors and deciding, okay, we got to choose because it's a close tie, it's et cetera, how many people are really going to vote for this candidate, how many vote for, it's a long process. So it could go on. And then, of course, you've had the president himself say that this election is going to be rigged. And the Democrats have firmly rejected that. The Democratic governors in all the states have rejected that. Republican governors haven't said much. Some have indicated they're siding with the president in his views. So I don't expect this election to be over on the 3rd of November, no.
Wow. And just continuing our discussion more on to the issues that were discussed last night at the vice presidential debate, what did you feel about their responses to the question on racial justice? Senator Harris definitely came out, making an argument for the African-American community being targeted by the police, and Vice President Mike Pence tried to defend that as well. How did you think they both succeeded in their own statements?
I mean, those were standard, I think, positions taken by both sides, each side. Kamala Harris took the Democratic line, which was diversity, which is racial injustice that's been going on, and of course, a lot of abuse of power by the police. She was an attorney general in California, so she knows a lot about these issues. That's one of her strong points. Vice President Pence took the strong Republican line, the Donald Trump line, as a matter of fact, which is we're going to defend the police forces. The police, all police are not bad, which is also true. I said that to you. that all police are not bad. You have a few bad apples in every organization, including the police, including the military, including corporations, including small businesses, whatever, you name it. You're going to have a few small bad apples. And you get rid of them and try to make the rest of it a much better place. So I think Vice President Pence stood firm in the president's position, which is we got the backs of law enforcement. Kamala Harris and the Democrats have also said they've got the backs of law enforcement, but they want to weed out the abuses of power as they see it from police. They do want to bring uplift, the Black community, the minorities around the country to a more equal level as everybody else. So they did focus. I think that was a standard focus both had on this issue. Both were well prepared about it on the issue. And of course, Vice President Pence, I did not expect him to go about saying, yes, there was injustice. There is injustice, because that would go against their whole line of thinking and their whole line of thinking for the election.
Yeah. Do you think they both appealed to their base as well?
Say that again?
Do you think both the candidates appealed well to their own base?
I think so. I think they both did. But I think this is an election that has been, the 4 years that have been very confusing for voters. So I think this debate would have been probably the more watched than the presidential debate. Because I think you've been seeing the discussions everywhere. Both these the president and the presidential candidate are up in age. Vice President Trump is going to be 78. President Trump is 74. He's already been infected with the virus. There is this thing in the back of everyone's minds. If something happens to either of them, if either is elected, or one being reelected, the other is elected, who can step into their shoes to rule the country? And I think that was the focus of voters, to see which of the two would be a suitable, president to step in. And I think it's hard for me to gauge right now. I had the impression that overall in the debate, Kamala Harris performed better than the vice president, because he had to worry about not displeasing the president in saying something, whereas Kamala Harris didn't have that encumbrance upon her. But I think as to their bases, yes, Kamala Harris must have excited the Black community for sure, the African American community. I think as far as the Asian community goes, they're divided right now. They have been divided. I've been watching a lot of Twitter feeds and WhatsApp exchanges from our community, the Asian community, and I see it's equally divided. There are many that supported Vice President Pence. Many supported Kamala Harris. So they're divided. The Latino community, I haven't heard much from yet. And I'm waiting to see what they thought about this. They've been a bit delayed in their reaction, because I guess nothing came up about their community to begin with. The Asians and the Africans were mentioned, but the Latino community, there was not much discussion. There was no discussion at all whatsoever in this debate.
Let's talk a little bit more about these elections, Mr. Vyas, while I still have you here. Where do you think the South Asian population is leaning to? Traditionally, we have seen in this nation, a lot of the majority of the South Asian population ends up supporting the Democratic Party. Recently, we have heard the numbers in the Republican Party are increasing, but what is your personal take on this?
Yeah, my personal take is, and I think I've shared it with you before, and it's even more reinforced now, is at least with the first generation Indian American, South Asian American. Well, no, let me extricate the Indian American community now from the South Asian community as a whole, because the Indian American community has grown in numbers, and they'd rather be thinking on their own now rather than being a part of this entire South Asian community as they have for decades. And the Indian American community is decidedly moving a lot faster in the direction of President Trump. Okay, but the majority are still in favor of the Democrats. All right. But that could change come election day. And if that change doesn't come election day, and if Trump wins, I think they will swing toward the Republican, or at least we'll have a 50-50 in the Indian American community. For the rest of the South Asian American community, I think the vast majority of them are Democratic. And I think that would include the Pakistanis, the Bangladeshis, the Sri Lankans, the Nepalese, etc. the Afghan Americans, there are, and believe it or not, there are lots of Afghan Americans. They would all be more Democratic leaning and not Republican leaning. But the Indian American community, which is growing more in influence, in wealth, in size, and all the rest of it, rapidly growing, I think we're going to see a big change. By the next 2 years, it'll be 50-50, 50% Republican, 50% Democratic.
According to you, right now, what is the South Asian population paying attention to when making their choice?
Largely, the first generation Indian Americans paying attention to relations between the United States and India, right? And over there, it's a win-win for President Trump because his personal friendship with Prime Minister Modi of India is paramount in their minds, and that makes Indians very happy. And absolutely rightfully so as well, because if you feel that your mother nation is being taken care of by your adopted nation, then you naturally will swing toward the administration that is making its efforts to reach out. So I think that's the way it's headed right now. That's paramount in their minds. For the South Asian, other parts of the South Asian community, I guess it's their minority status, many of them being Muslim, and they must have this worry of what's going to happen to them if there is another Trump administration, because the perception is that they won't be safe, or they might have to watch their backs and things like that, which I don't think is overall true, but that would be the perception among the Muslim population of the South Asian community, in my opinion. So I think in that case, they would lean more toward the Democrats rather than to the Republicans. The Indians as a whole are not worried about that issue at all. They want to make sure that relations with India are good. They know that they contribute to this country immensely already. Indians have always contributed immensely. So have the South Asians as a whole. But for the Indians specifically, they feel confident in themselves. And so they're going to take a decidedly more political approach to this. The others would be thinking more about their interests and their personal interests of what's going to happen here in the United States, not so much overseas in international relations. The other thing for the Indian American community is the fact that the U.S. has pulled away from China so much. And China right now is almost at war with India up in the Himalayas. There are face-offs going on right now as we speak, a very dangerous situation, not just for that part of the world, but for the entire world. And I think this is a strategic time. And so that focus is very much in the minds of the Indian American community. The rest of the South Asian American community, that's not their focus, and they're not so worried about it because most of them have, pretty good allied ties with China. So when you think of now these, I'm talking about the first generation. The second generation, I think, is a whole different ballgame. That's the younger people who are born here, grown up here, from the entire South Asian American community. They are divided as well, but they're not divided as their parents are. So they'll be less bothered by those issues. They'll be more, I think the young generation is more, shall we say, they're not radical, but they're rebels. Okay, they're rebels. They care about what's going to happen to their economic future, to whether they'll be able to get a good job, whether they'll be able to have a great profession, to be able to raise families here as Americans. So they're thinking as Americans, the younger generation. I think that would be an interesting topic for you to pick up one of these days. Talk to the younger generation, find out what they're thinking about this election. I'm sure you'll find, you'll be very surprised at how they think. They'll be very different from their thinking of the older generation.
Definitely. I still have a few questions left here for you.
Yeah.
Which swing states are you currently watching? Where do you think the majority of the decision is going to be based out of?
Say that again. I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Which swing states are you currently watching, and where do you think the decision will end up being?
Which states you're talking about? Which states?
Swing states, yeah.
Swing states you're talking about, yeah. Michigan, Pennsylvania, definitely. Florida, I think at this point, in my opinion, will head Republican because they've opened up the economy so fast, and I think that's what Governor DeSantis actually wanted to do, was to let people feel normal. And so I have a feeling that Florida is going to go to the Republicans. I'll be surprised if it doesn't happen that way. But definitely Michigan, Pennsylvania will be the two keys, especially Pennsylvania. You're going to see a lot of action over there. Georgia, Wisconsin, I think we're going to have to study these states very carefully. But Michigan right now, and especially in light of what we've just heard from the FBI of this militia plot to overthrow the government there, a very serious situation. So I'm wondering right now, and I'm sure the FBI is on top of this, I'm wondering right now if there's a big divide in that state. Because over there, then, the election is going to be highly contentious, perhaps more than anywhere else in the country. And that could be a critical swing state. And results over there may not be accepted as easily just because of what has just been unearthed by the FBI.
What, according to you, does the Democratic Party need to do right now to win these swing states?
I think they just have to carry on doing what they're doing. From what we see in the polls, Biden is leading, the Biden camp is leading by 14 percentage points. That's according to most polls. Some put it at 16, some put it at 12. I've told you before, I don't really take these polls seriously because a lot of them were predicting Hillary Clinton's victory back in 2016. That didn't happen. This time, though, there are many issues that are bothering Main Street America, such as the continuing unemployment rate, such as the continuing economic hardships that many people are feeling. And bear in mind the fact that you have to keep away economic hardship, Main Street's woes from the stock market. The stock market, people tend to look at the stock market and think things are fantastic, booming, great, America's great. No, the stock market is a whole different ballgame. Right. Does not reflect what's happening on Main Street. There are many workers out there who I know personally, I've seen them and talked to them, are suffering immensely, and have no idea what they're going to do. They haven't gotten the relief yet, which they needed, and which the Fed chair, Jerome Powell himself, said was absolutely essential to prevent a bubble from bursting, from a collapse, a catastrophic economic collapse. So this is a pretty serious time right now. And this election, I think, will determine a lot. But again, it's going to be highly, highly contentious.
My final question to you has to be, what are you concerned about the most when you're looking at these elections, especially because you are a journalist and a political analyst?
I'm most concerned about the unity of the United States. From what I can see from all of this, the Russians are having their way. This is very, very serious. This was exactly what they wanted. They wanted disinformation. They wanted to sow these seeds of chaos in the United States. This has been the Russian, modus operandi from the very beginning, from the days of the Cold War. And now with social media, they are masters at this. They know what they want to do. FBI officials have been warning the country about this. I agree with them. I have in the past covered many FBI cases, and I can tell you that the FBI knows its job and knows it very, very well. I would trust them hands down, whatever they come up with, and their analysis is correct. That's what worries me as a journalist. That's what worries me as an American citizen, is the unity of our country, the United States. We need to preserve it. We need to stand united. And no matter who wins this election, we need to have an orderly transition. This chaos has to end. It must end. Everybody who reads their WhatsApp messages, their Twitter accounts, Facebook, needs to be very careful and understand there is no vetting. There's no vetting in any of these social media. That's why good old objective journalists are so important. And there are very few good old objective journalists left. Most of the journalists you see today are opinionated. They go on the air and they give their opinions one way or the other, right or left. I don't agree with that. I've always said that we as journalists, the old school journalists, we were trained specifically to report.
Right.
We leave it to you, the viewers, to make your judgments, come to your own conclusions. We're not supposed to feed you any information, because that then is, again, influencing people. It's not being a journalist, it's influencing people. I'm afraid for my own profession, the profession of journalism, responsible journalism. We've already lost a lot of credibility, and I'm afraid we'll lose more if this continues, this kind of disinformation and belief in disinformation continues. So those are my fears.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it's always a pleasure having you here with us, Mr. Vyas. And I really hope everyone watching us right now decides to vote if they're eligible. I think that's so important. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you. Yes, go out there and vote. And if you have the mail-in ballot, go ahead, mail that ballot right away. Make your vote count. Right? Thank you, Aditi.